Hi everybody, so my name is LM Santana. I'm an indie writer getting ready to publish my second book and republish my first book in my debut work, which is a historical fantasy series. If you want to hear the story of why I'm republishing my first book, I'll try to add that video in the description or somewhere around if I could figure that out. If not, it's in my channel as the video before this one. It should be fairly easy to find since I don't have that many videos. I'm still trying to find my niche in social media and in YouTube, but I've noticed that authors here do one of two things. Either they'll review other people's books, or they'll give advice on writing and publishing if they've gotten that far. Now, I'm not confident in my ability to do either of those things. I'm barely getting by with my own work. So for now, I think I'm gonna focus on, sharing my process and and my ideas and how I've done things. The goal is to hopefully get some of you interested in my work. And if you do give it a chance, hopefully these videos will help you enjoy and appreciate them a little bit more. With that being said, let's get the show on the road. Because my debut work is a fantasy series and I kind of went overboard on the world building, something I'm actually quite proud of, this first video is going to be, you guessed it, about world building. Now, a brief disclaimer, this is my first time writing a book and publishing. I have no experience and all the choices I made are my opinion alone. I think this video might be split up into multiple parts because, like I said, I did a lot of world building. But let's start with the magic and the creatures, which makes the historical fiction into a historical fantasy. When working on creating the magic, I had to figure out 4 things. What level of magic I wanted to have, so how much magic each character will have, what type of magic, how would it work for each character, the connection to the historical aspect, and finally the separation between light and dark. For the level of magic, I first had to figure out what role I wanted magic to play in the story. I knew that I wanted magic to blend flawlessly into daily life. I didn't want it to be seen as something rare or special like a computer would be seen in modern times. So I knew I wanted a high level of magic for the story. That was actually pretty easy to figure out. The type of magic was hard because I was very cautious of what was already out there, especially what was very popular and what the general public classify as magic based on popular works. I didn't want my work to compare to anything that was already out there. I didn't know that authors kind of use this as a tool to promote their work. So, for example, they'll say, if you like Beauty and the Beast and Lord of the Rings, then you like my story because it's like a blend of both of them. And then the fans from both these stories would flock to your work. I didn't realize that authors were doing this. I didn't realize this was a very powerful tool. I didn't even realize that a lot of readers want this because to them it's kind of like an old classic being revitalized. I very much didn't want my work to be compared to others. For one, I wanted my work to shine on its own light. I didn't want it to be considered a child of so-and-so, And for 2, I didn't want readers to compare my work to other very popular works and find mine lacking because it didn't meet up to their expectations. So I went out of my way to completely separate my work from anything that it could be compared to. A Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, anything that it could be compared to, I tried extremely hard to not look anything like it, to the point where that was my main goal instead of kind of building my own world. It was like, well, they did this, well, I can't do that. They did this, well, I can't do that. I might not completely succeeded, but that was my goal. That was my main goal because I wanted my work to shine on its own. I wanted to be its own star, For me, this meant no wands or spells. I wanted my magic to be more seamless. I also didn't want to create a bunch of random words. So I made magic this sentient energy that fulfills the will of the wielder. Kind of like magic very much based on intent. The type of magic that I did was very much old school versus my own ideas. because magic wasn't necessarily the story. Magic was what helped me, what helped the plot move along, or what helped the story become something more. This moved me along to connection, and by connection I meant connecting magic to the historical aspect so that they both flowed seamless together. How did I connect it to the historical world? I wanted very much magic to be a tool that I could wield to kind of modernize my story. I wanted a historical story, but I wanted a lot of modern aspects to that story. Modern aspects that wouldn't make sense unless there's a reason behind them living in that story. So I used magic as a way to kind of justify the fact that this can happen in the story, or this is possible in the story. And that's how I connected the story, the magic, to kind of the historical aspect. And then I added a celestial being that would kind of justify magic as a energy and why it exists and why it's okay and it's not taboo and it's not, you're not gonna burn at the stakes for using it. I mean, kind of, but it's not. It's I don't know how to explain it without like giving spoilers, but it's not necessarily having to do with magic, more to do with tension between two races instead of the magical aspects. But I won't get into that because that's kind of very much spoiler. Maybe I'll do a video once the book is out talking about that plot and where that came from. But overall, magic is not something illegal or taboo because the celestial beings created, and it's there because it's a tool for me, for the author, for me to make things a lot easier for myself. The final point to figure out was separation. And now this may seem like a contradiction to the previous point, connection, but separation simply referred more to the difference between the creatures. So how each magic will work for each creature. I didn't want all the creatures' magic to seem or work the same, especially light and dark creatures. This is where the natural and elemental magic aspect came into play for me. Now we move on to the fun part. Creatures. Like I said, I'm a huge fantasy fan, and this is where I had fun, kind of. A little background before kind of I tell you I get into this. When I first got the idea of the story was a long time ago. I mean, a long time ago. I think the Twilight movies were just like, they were a big thing at the time. I think the last one was coming out, or it came out, and the Tudor series, which is a historical drama on Henry VIII on Showtime, that was still alive. I think it was in its final season, or the final season had just finished. But yeah, that's when this idea came to be, and when I started writing things down. The story wasn't fully developed until kind of not recently, I don't want to say recently, but a few years after that. So that being said, and I'm explaining that because when I first picked creatures, I very much wanted to stay away from creatures that were popular at the time. So the main characters, I didn't want them to be werewolves and vampires because I didn't want the Twilight comparison, even if I made them different from the Twilight series. I also didn't want comparison. There was Twilight, True Blood, there was a lot of vampire stuff that I didn't want to compare to. I didn't want to make them wizards or witches because, of course, Harry Potter. I think Game of Thrones was coming out at that time, so I didn't want to do dragons either. Then there was Lord of the Rings, which has always been popular, so I didn't want to make them like, I didn't want to focus on elves either because there will be comparison to that, elves and like dwarves and things like that. Don't get me wrong, I do add those stories in, I do add those creatures in my story, but not in the way that they have it, and they're not kind of the focus or the main creatures. And don't get me wrong, this wasn't me trying to set myself apart or be different from everybody else. This was insecurity. I didn't have the confidence in me or my work to compete with these giants or even think that I could get on the same level as them, so I didn't want any comparison being made. That being said, at that time there was only one creature that was well known for in mythology, that wasn't really explored as much in media, and that was fairies. Yes, laugh it up. I know. I'll get to that. So at the time, the most that there was for fairies was kind of Disney with like the Tinkerbell series. There was Shakespeare with Midsummer Night's Dream, and then I think there was a few more, but fairies weren't really big at the time. They were either like I said, Disney, or they were like for kids, or they were like very much the side character that does a little bit mischief, or the comic character that's just there. So I thought, great, I could write about fairies. That being said, the story took a lot, like I said, it took a lot longer than I thought it would, mainly because it was supposed to be one story, and it was so long that I had to separate it into multiple books. When I separated them, I had to rewrite them because they didn't stand on their own as they should with each book in a series. By the time I had to do this, fairies and their name were changed to Fae saw a boom in the literary world. Like everybody and their mother were like writing stories about fairies. I wasn't as into the world as the literary world as I am now, so I don't know who started it, but just there were stories about fairies all over the place. Then the Acostar, I haven't read any of the books, but I know them. A Court of Thorn and Roses, I know them because social media has forced me to know them. That has become the basis of what like fairies are. So unfortunately, by the time my story was ready to publish, people were so tired of fairies. They were just begging writers, just write something else, please. There's so many fairies. And if not, they were expecting the fairies to seem like a Thorn of Court and Roses. So kind of the sexy, kind of like steamy, kind of like, that kind of fairy, which I didn't do. I could either change my story completely when it was already ready to publish, or I could just publish. So what did I do? I said, fuck it. Let's see. Maybe there will be people that, won't compare it to other stories, because I was hoping that my benefit was the fact that I had worked so hard to flawlessly blend magical creatures into my story, to the point that if you stepped outside, it would be completely normal for you to see like a fairy flying around and you wouldn't think anything of it. Also, that might be the New Yorker in me, since I'm used to seeing crazy shit all the time and going about my day. But that's what I wanted. For this reason, I didn't necessarily create like a whole separate world from humans for fairies. Like they had their kingdom, but I didn't create like separate worlds for them, and I didn't make them a different dimension or anything like that. I didn't do a world where only fairies live and only humans live and they know about each other and there's tension or whatever. I think there's a book like that. I've seen so many brief YouTube videos about all the books on fays that I think I know all of them without actually reading them. Unfortunately, as different as my story is, or my fairies are, that wouldn't matter, because the stories that came out before mine already set the mold of what people are expecting about fairy stories and what people want to see about fairy stories. So my story will always be found either lacking or kind of weird for some people, because it's just not what they're used to seeing or what they fell in love with seeing about fairies. I just decided to go with it, and for the rest of my magical creatures, and not care that there are stories with other magical creatures. So I added more magical creatures, but I gave them my own spin. So what I did was I researched the OG magical story, and I added my own spin to it. So what I did was I researched the OG magical story, and I added my own spin to them. I didn't read any fantasy book that was out there. Even the older fantasy books, I didn't read any of them. So I even bought this, which is the Brothers Grimm book, with the stories from the Brothers Grimm, and then I kind of went over them I haven't read all the stories, but I kind of went over them to kind of get an idea of how the OGs were seen, how elves and vampires and werewolves and fairies and wizards and witches and all that were seen in the older days. And then I added my own spin to them. So I would probably make a video about creatures because I actually made kind of my very own bestiary about creatures and the worlds and things as such. Yeah, so I made my own bestiary on the creatures, which maybe I'll like publish somehow. I don't know, because I did it by hand, so I don't know how I will publish it. But I made my own bestiary, which was in the goal when I started the story. So I have plenty material to kind of do a whole video on just explaining how I changed the creatures in my own version. To some of them, you could tell that they're the old version. To others, I just used them. I'm interested in hearing the new spin that I gave to old classics. Let me know. I can make a video about that. Trust me, I could make a video about that. But I'm not gonna get into that. But I'll give you an example. So for fairies, so like I said, I made them human size, and then I added a few lords that kind of from the OGs, kind of like they look younger than they are, so they age slower. They're kind of very in tune to nature and like hide within nature. They live within nature. But then I added my own spin, which is the elemental magic aspect of the story, where I separate them by element so that they each have an element that they can control, that they could have power over, kind of like a category. And then this element would show in their skin. So like tattoos that glow in their skin, that's their element. So for example, a plant fairy would have like plants tattooed on their skin glowing green. Animal fairies, they will have animals on their skin glowing purple. That's the color that I chose for animal fairies, so on and so forth. After that, then I added a few other things and tweaks, like the wings. I made it so that only female fairies had wings, and I made it, instead of like the clear butterfly wings, I gave them kind of hummingbird wings, because I like when a hummingbird is flying, I like how fast like the wings look. They look like they practically disappear. I like that aspect, so I gave them hummingbird wings. And then to be a little more logical about the flying, I gave them wings on their ankles, kind of like a bird's tail would help them fly. And then I have a character, so this is one of my main characters. She would be an animal fairy, and I'll add the picture on the screen if I can figure out how to do that. And then this was another character. He is a plant fairy, so you see what I mean, the markings on their skin, the color of, you know, their elements. And then for them, see the wings, and then the wings on her ankles as well. And then for the magic rulers of this story, which was, instead of doing witches and wizards, I did sorcerer and sorceress, which are the good guys, and then warlocks are kind of the bad guys. And warlocks in this story is a gender neutral term, so warlocks is a female or a male that uses dark magic. Sorcerer and sorcerers are the ones that do light magic, and like I said, for them, their magic is about intent very much. So their magic is sentient energy that kind of, if they say, hey, light that on fire, it lights it on fire. I did add the scientific aspect, kind of alchemy aspect of magic, where they could blend different ingredients together to make like a powder that could put people to sleep, or combine different things to kind of amplify the power. Like if they're doing a shield, they provide different things that kind of amplify it, or if they use their blood, they could do kind of like a sacrificial thing. But no spells, no wands. So yeah, that was the magic and creature side of world building. It was a lot more chaotic than I'm making it seem. Then again, maybe this video was also chaotic. I'm not sure. I'll probably cut a bunch of stuff. This is how my thought process went about when creating this world, when creating all the magic and all the creatures in this world. It's still ongoing, because I finished book 1. I finished book 2. I finished book 3, although it needs a lot more editing. And then I'm currently writing book 4, which will be the final book. So as I'm still writing, there's still more that I want to add, more like creatures and things like that. Because after all, I made this world, and I think that's what I did about the world building. I didn't focus on just the story. I made this world like it is a world on its own. There's plenty of stories to go around. But yeah, that's how I built the magic and the creatures aspect of this world. I'm not sure if that's how everybody went about it. I probably won't recommend it. It was a lot of research, but like I said, it was chaotic. If you guys see my notes, it's like even I have a hard time reading them. It was just chaotic. There's a lot of piece of papers where there's just they're just random things in sticky notes and things like that. So I have a notebook. I have multiple folders with different things. I have my bestiary that I haven't even finished yet, and then I have the notes for the bestiary, the research. It's crazy. I know I went overboard for the level of story that this is. This is nowhere near Lord of the Rings or J.K. I had a lot of fun world building for the story, and it's constantly fun, and I constantly add more to it. I think, in my humble opinion, world building is the one thing that I don't doubt about my story, that I won't doubt about my story, that I think I actually did a good job on. Hence why I'm doing these videos, just to share that with you guys, and hopefully the first book should be out soon, and you guys will go read it and like compare what I've said here to like what's in the stories, and see if kind of I achieved what I wanted, or if it does compare to stories that I haven't read, that I just hearing about them I was influenced. I'm not sure. Let me know. So yeah, that was the first video on world building. I think the next video will be focused on the kind of location and setting of world building. So like where, when, yeah, let me know, and thanks for watching.